Back when I was a kid, my mom was moving in with a new boyfriend and I was unpacking all of my moving boxes when I came across a plastic piece of bread. This bread went to an entire little tea set that I had that I was probably too old to play with, and I didn't have the rest of the tea set anymore. However, I didn't want to get rid of the bread. I had this feeling like, what if I need this someday? What if someday I am seeking this piece of bread and it's nowhere to be found? And this same thing kept happening as I went through the moving boxes. I would come across random pieces of a puzzle or a playset that no longer had the pieces and was no longer being played with, but I so badly didn't want to get rid of it that I just taped them all to my wall. I'm telling you this because that fear, that mindset of what if I need this someday, is one of the 3 biggest clutter blocks that I've noticed keep a lot of people from getting rid of the clutter in their homes. And I know it's something that I personally struggled with big time. I have shared about these 3 clutter blocks and how you can clear them in my ebook, The Gentle Art of Letting Shit Go. But I also just did a blog post on it that was featured on Becoming Minimalist this past weekend. Since this seems like a topic a lot of people are struggling with, I thought I would share with you the 3 biggest mindset blocks that are keeping you in the clutter and how to clear them. Clutter block number 1 is the fear of throwing things away. I think we can all agree that throwing things away feels really gross because there's this internal voice in us going, this is so wasteful. And the tough part about this clutter block is that that inner voice isn't wrong. This internal nudge that we get sets off little alarm bells in our head telling us that something is off. Now, the tough part about this clutter block is that if you come from a long line of Great Depression survivors, penny pinchers, war survivors, or any marginalized group, it's probably going to be even stronger. Hoarding tendencies show up for people who struggle with perfectionism, trauma, or of course, a family history of hoarding. That's why if you are someone who struggles to throw things away because that inner voice in you just feels so gross about it, I've put together a few different ideas to hopefully put your mind at ease. Let's go do some chores while we chat some more. One of the first things to ask yourself if you're feeling afraid of throwing something away is this fear still relevant to my life today? I remember this time where my mom was telling me how my grandma from Japan never ate lima beans because growing up during the war, she and her family had to eat lima beans all the time. So why did she stop consuming lima beans? Because it was no longer relevant to her need to survive. I tell you this story because sometimes that need to save or that fear of throwing away isn't really our fear. It's been hardwired into us from those who came before us. There was even an experiment conducted on mice that found that traumas are passed down through about 7 generations. So you might be carrying around the beliefs of your great grandma. And the thing is, the fears that were relevant to her life aren't necessarily relevant to yours. For example, if you did have family who lived through the Great Depression, famine, or other really difficult times, look around and ask yourself if you're living in similar circumstances and need to follow by those same rules. In a lot of ways, the people who came before us were living in times of scarcity, which is why they had that whole waste not, want not mentality. This is even why flower companies started using floral prints on their flower bags so that when moms repurposed the flower bags into dresses, the little girls had flowers on their flour sacks instead of a brown flower bag. So I know this might get you thinking, waste not, want not is not a bad mentality. We should all be more intentional with the things that we have. However, if you are currently struggling with clutter in your home and you have more than you can manage, I would argue the fact that you are not living in times of scarcity like your great-grandparents did, but rather you are living in a time of abundance and overconsumption. Because we are living in a time of abundance, the problem isn't throwing things away. The problem is that we continue to consume too much. And that's really where the wasteful part starts to come into play. On top of that, still living by that same scarcity mindset is often encouraging us to accumulate more. Think about it like this. Back in the day when food was scarce, our family members had to save as much as they possibly could. Whenever times were plenty, they had to stock up. So now when we are already living in times of abundance, but we haven't shaken this scarcity mindset, we go to places like Walmart and see things on the clearance rack that are marked down $3 and we think, oh my gosh, I have to stock up. But remember, we are not living in those scarce times. We are living in a time where most of us have more than we need. This is why instead of clinging to the things in our home that are truly broken, are unable to be salvaged, or handed down to anyone else, and clinging to them in the name of not being wasteful, maybe we should flip our mentality and slow the amount of things we allow to come into our home, because most of these things will ultimately end up in the garbage anyway. This is why I always give the reminder that an unused item in your home is basically already garbage. Clutter block number 2 is, what if this is worth something someday? I cannot tell you how many times I was told to hang on to stuff when I was a kid because it might be worth something someday. Beanie Babies, Barbie dolls, CDs, stuffed animals. First of all, can I just say how cruel it is to ask a 9-year-old not to bust open her brand new Spice Girl Barbie dolls? As if. And the funny thing is, I actually took the time one day to calculate how much money I would have made from unopened, packaged up Spice Girl Barbie dolls. And the answer is, I basically would have broken even from what my grandma paid for them in the first place. I know the next thing you want to do is immediately head to the comment section and let me know about that time that you actually made money on something you hung on to. And that's fine, but take the time to consider these next few things. One thing people don't often take the time to consider is how much time, energy, and even sometimes money goes into maintaining these objects because they might be worth something someday. So let's just say I did decide to cart around my Spice Girl Barbie dolls from age 10 to age 37. I would have either moved them myself or paid to have them moved 7 to 8 times by now. I would have had to set up an eBay account, which I don't know how to do. I would have also had to take the time to run that account or that online auction, which I do not like doing, and maybe would have broken even if I was lucky. I even read a story in Tracy McCubbin's book, Make Space for Happiness, where she talks about working with a client who really struggled to let go of her mom's Precious Moments dolls. But where were these Precious Moments dolls? In storage. Not really all that precious if they're being carted around from storage bay to storage bay. But I get it. The allure of potentially making money on something is really exciting. So here's what you can do instead. Start looking into things like investing as a viable way to make money. I know that the idea of investing can sound really scary, but I promise you the risk is much lower than putting all of your chips into a basket full of Beanie Babies. If you're not sure where to get started, you can grab my list of my 50 favorite books where I share my 10 favorite money books, including the investing books that I used to start investing. Or podcast episode where I share exactly what I did to create a 7-figure investment plan as a stay-at-home mom. Lastly, let's talk about that what if I need this someday fear. That one that I was struggling with when I taped bread to my wall. The funny thing about this fear is that it can take many different forms. We can have that fear of throwing away that random thing in the junk drawer only to find out a week later that we actually really needed it and it was super important. Or that fear of getting rid of something someone gave us and then the nightmare idea that they're going to show up at our front door with a pitchfork in hand demanding that we show them the item that they gave us 7 years ago. Now, are either of these scenarios likely? No. But does that make the fear any less? Not really. This is where I'm going to get a little bit crazy and tell you that the better you can get at eliminating those things in your junk drawer that you feel like you might need someday, the braver you can become in every other area of your life. Think about it like this. When you open up that junk drawer, you have a very real fear of eliminating that item and someday needing it. And going through the process of putting it in the garbage and letting it go sparks something in you that feels scary. But the more that you lean into that fear, that discomfort, that into the unknown, the better you'll get at facing that same fear in life. Personally, the better I got at letting go of things, the better I got at letting go of other things like people pleasing or saying no to people. But if it still feels too scary, here are 2 questions that you can ask yourself to make it a little bit easier. Number 1, have I used this item in the last year? And number 2, what is the worst thing that could happen if I got rid of this? For real, go crazy. I bet you'll kind of find that worst thing probably isn't as bad as you imagine. And if being rational with yourself fails you, try my go-to solution, the maybe bin. The maybe bin is something I talked about in my video where I share my 4-bin declutter method. You can click above to watch it, and is a proven method for helping people who have the what if I need this someday fear. Taking the time to put items that you are fearful of getting rid of into a maybe box and storing them for 6 months to a year can be a great way to show you the peace of having a clutter-free space without the commitment of having to let go. Remember, going through the process of decluttering isn't something that you have to rush through. You can take tiny baby steps and ease your way into it. And if you want to learn even more about my favorite ways to declutter, you can sign up below for my 3-day reset. Everything I've mentioned in this video you can access in the show notes, and be sure to like, follow, and subscribe because I'm going to keep the party going. Hopefully this video helped you clear through some blocks you might have around getting rid of clutter. If I missed something, let me know in the comments. Or if one of these things really resonated with you, let me know that too, because I need to know I'm not the only one.